Welcome to the Evening Review. My name is Sukhane Klache, and joining me once again in studio is Joyce Muzengua, who will be reflecting on the recent case in which South Africa took the state of Israel to the International Criminal Court of Justice. Welcome back to the Evening Review.
Thank you for having me, Khane.
As a descendant of the genocide, having seen now this matter where South Africa is challenging the actions of Israel at the International Court of Justice regarding now the people of Palestine. What comes to mind, or what came to mind when this case came underway?
Well, Khane, I would say that was a bold move from South Africa. South Africa's solidarity when it comes to the Palestinians is not just based on idealism, but it materialized, and they took that bold move of taking the Israeli state to the ICJ. And of course, it was for an African state. It is the first that we see, and the action, of course, was necessary. It was pertinent that somebody at some point had to do something about the ongoing violence between the two states. Of course, we know that you had the UN, the United States, the UN, that wanted to basically intercept. But however, something had to be done. Especially within the contemporary context, something had to be done. And of course, one really, I admire the move of South Africa, and I hope that it is only the start. And I hope that it also encourages more states to let our solidarity not just be in words and statements in the media, but let it materialize by bold action such as that of South Africa. So it is a commendable move.
And then, just in your mind, there's a lot of strong feelings that Germany committed a genocide within Namibia, particularly against the Ovaherero and the Nama people. Did it set off any triggers as this whole process unfolded in the Netherlands?
It did. It did. The Ovaherero and Nama peoples themselves were glued to the screens during these procedures in the Netherlands. It did set a trigger because post-colonialism of the African continent as a whole, really, you only hear, when you hear about the genocide question, it is usually not elevated to that level. So when we heard about it, the people were glued to the screens. Everybody was dying to know, to understand what are the parallels between our case and that of the Palestinians, and how can we also take our case to that level? What can be done? So it was millions and millions of questions. So it was really a trigger, given that now the current the litigation that was filed domestically is still at case management level, so it sort of subsided in the news and all that. So when they heard about it, of course, it was a trigger. So now people are asking questions. So where is our case? What is going on? What can be done? Can we speak to South Africa to also file on our behalf? Can South Africa file on our behalf? Why did South Africa first start with the Palestinians and not with our case here, while we are our neighbor? So it was a lot of questions, it was a lot of emotions, also excitement, strong emotions, and all that. Especially, of course, when Germany intervened for the Israeli, calling what happens in Palestine not a genocide, and the strong comments that were made by Germany. So it really aggravated the people. It brought forth strong emotions. And one can definitely deem it a trigger, yes.
And then what came out of this entire court process, of course, was President Hage Geingob at the time condemning the actions of Germany and saying and telling them where to get off. Is it consistent with how our Namibian government is approaching Germany in trying to get Germany to atone for its actions, having now come out? Is there consistency?
Of course not, Khane. Of course not. That was just, I think the president was trying to stage PR coup to sort of maybe have his voice somewhere in the media there, or maybe the administration in the State House are they probably the ones that thought, let's have the president say something, because it's not. It's not. Look, Okhone, the only thing that the victims of the descendants of the Herero and Nama people want is participation, which is their right. Namibia has acceded to that international statute. That means Article 144 of our constitution domesticated. So all they want is participation. They claim that the ongoing negotiations were conducted, of course, as we know, were conducted in line with the 2006 motion, which is not the case. However, the 2006 motion emphasized on participatory rights. That is all that the participants that the affected communities want. It's participation. That is really all that they want, of which they are being denied by both states. And of course, within our domestic case, even though it is based on procedural and substantive law, it is also clear that really the center of it all is participatory rights of the affected victims, that they are being denied by both our state and the state of Germany. So the approach there is quite different. Outside, you're trying to play the good guy while you're the villain back home. And that is why, of course, the consultations that are done by the team of the state or for the committee of the states after whatever stage of negotiations they get to, they are rejected without the community even having to listen to them. Because people don't want, we are a people-centric state. Everything that we do is centered around the people. Remember, the state is mainly comprised by what? By the people. It's the community. So we are a populist supremacy as a state, and that really must be respected. And whatever the people don't want, they will always reject. And our government really, let's see how far they go with these negotiations. But should they sign and the court verdict here goes against them, it's going to be a blow against them.
People speak of my apologies. People speak of a genocide that is being committed in Palestine today. At the same time, historically, we speak about the genocide that was committed against the Nama and the Ovaherero people. What are the parallels? You know, what are the where do these two concepts meet, or where do these two events meet? One historical, one modern day, if at all. You know, what are the commonalities? What are the differences?
Of course, there are commonalities, there are differences. However, the main commonality here is that both events were qualified as genocide. And that in itself, when you look at, even though the Herero and Nama genocide occurred before the statute was enacted, it's still, even when you look at the act when you look at the statute, one could still qualify it as genocide. In the 2019 case of the Association of the Ovaherero Genocide et al. Versus the German state in the Federal Court of the Federal Court of New York of 2019, the court did qualify the events that happened in German Southwest Africa between 1904 and 1908 as a genocide. And also, of course, in substantive law, the South African lawyers did a very, very good job in qualifying that the events that happens in Palestine indeed are a genocide, and the intent was also clear. With the Ovaherero Nama genocide case, for instance, our intent was, the Germans were so deliberate that our intent was put in writing, and then they subsequently fulfilled that intent. Now, with this case, of course, they had to prove the intent, which is very, very strong. In a genocide case, you must prove intent if somebody had a genocide, and sometimes it becomes very, very, very crucial, because the intent is always, it's not always that apparent, but however, if you have all the necessary weapons, on your side, you will be able to prove intent. So with ours, the intent is clear. The South African lawyers were able to qualify the intent. And also, of course, now I'm not a lawyer. I won't be able to state everything. But I think from my point of view, that I think is what is central to that. And also, really, when you look at the differences, we are contesting the intertemporal argument of the Germans. Now, intertemporality is a legal concept that that basically argues that not necessarily argues, but it states that you should not be prosecuted for a crime that happened before the statute was enacted. Now, with us, the German, that is basically their main argument, that, and that is why in the joint declaration they say that it is genocide in today's perspective. Because now that there is a statute in place that is for the prevention against genocide, for the punishment and the prevention against the crime of genocide. So if it happened after the act was enacted, you could have termed it genocide. So in today's perspective, it's genocide. But the Herero and Nama genocide happened before the statute was enacted, and therefore it doesn't really qualify as a genocide in that matter. So we are battling that the intertemporal concept, of course, and also with the fact that, I mean, when you look at the German arguments, you know, it's sometimes when I read those documents, I sit and say, you know, when you look at this, the thought scholars, when you look at the philosophers, when you read those legal arguments of the Germans, it just sort of reminds me that the Karl Marx, the Aristotle, and all those big guys were Germans. So when those guys put their arguments on paper, they mean business. And they really, I mean, they made arguments such as, because part of the arguments that of the Ovaherero and Nama case is that the Germans also looted the minerals and all that, and they were not purchased as they were supposed to be, given that the land belonged to the Herero and the Nama at the time. However, they put up substantive arguments such as, but that was the state that they were governing. So the minerals belonged to the state of Germany, given that the state of Germany was governing the German Southwest Africa at the time. The annexation of Southwest Africa was formalized, and it was accepted by all the organs of the state, of the international world at the time. So our case, really, the context and also the approach that the Western world generally, given that it is the one that has set this international jurisprudence, it's difficult for us because, I mean, Germany was able to successfully argue in the Federal Court of New York that even with the laws that were there at the time, the laws only apply to the civilized world. And the Herero and the Nama were savages, and therefore the laws did not apply to them. In other words, they are black. These only applied to the white and the civilized whites, and the Herero and Nama as Africans are black, so these laws did not apply to them. So we are battling a lot of historical obstacles that the German government openly feels that they can argue just like that without any fear or favor whatsoever. So that is where our difficulty comes in, given the historical occurrence of it, and given the approach of the West towards its historical sins. When you look at basically all the European countries none of them has paid any dues to the countries that they have colonized. In Africa in the past, you see how their heavy hand of oppression is still in our economies and in our what. So the Herero and the Nama people have set a global precedent by taking not only a superpower to court, but by taking this superpower to court as ethnic groups, not even as the state, given that the Namibian state is pro pro whatever approaches of the settlement of the German state. So we are really dealing with a lot of historical obstacles, historical oppressions, and the West, of course, does not want to deal with it.
Of course.
Whereas with the Palestinians, given all the statutes that are in place, now the Palestinian can sort of argue a case to say, but with all the statutes that are in place, the Jewish still went ahead, and the Israeli government went ahead and with a clear intent of perpetrating a genocide, wiping them off, literally ethnic cleansing to the Palestinian people. So the Palestinian people maybe have an advantage of a context that we do not have.
Of course.
Yes.
I want to continue the conversation, but we'll have to call for a short commercial break. Yeah. Do kindly stay tuned. We'll be back.
Neo Paints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neo Paints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neo Paints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
Welcome back from that short commercial break. Now, these discussions we tend to have these discussions of the genocide quite often, and it's always coming from the side of the affected communities. And I've got two questions, or my question is twofold. Is enough being done to elevate this matter of there was a genocide committed in Namibia against the Nama-Ovaherero, and do you think that there is enough civic education to help Namibians and descendants in Botswana and South Africa and elsewhere come to an understanding that there were grave atrocities committed against our people in the past by Germany?
Well, the ultimate effort for us to actually achieve the goal of letting every Namibian know about what actually happened within the German imperial period is when the state takes, when there's political power to actually do that. But we know how the 1960s history is sort of pressed down our throat, and now the communities themselves don't really have enough resources to do that, because they do these things out of their pockets, and all these cases that they have to go through and whatnot. So you look at the lack of political will, and now the communities themselves have to sit and weigh, okay, do we need more? What is it that we need more? Is it international advocacy or domestic advocacy? Which one is going to have more impact? Is it the international world or is it the domestic world? With the domestic setup, you see the lack of political will, and why is it, for instance, that when our textbooks in school speak of the National War of Resistance, they don't speak of a genocide that was even just with a little bit of legal insight to say why it is that we qualify what happened between 1904 and 1908 a genocide. Why is it that we qualify what happened in 1892 as a genocide? Why is it that? And why is it called a genocide? So it's this lack of political will within the country. You find that the statesmen themselves are not even honest with the people. I mean, the very first press conference on an update on the negotiations, the Prime Minister and the Vice President were adamant that it's reparations. And Germany had to answer and say, no, it is not reparations. And then as they went forth, it was said that the funds will be directed to the victims themselves, but then the funds are being channeled through Vision 2030, or they are set to achieve Vision 2030, and they will be implemented in 7 regions, where in those 7 regions, the affected communities are still minorities. So the inconsistencies already, even with the process that the government itself is controlling. It is, even if anybody wanted to, there is no trust within them because there is no transparency. The negotiations were already conducted in a lot of secrecy. So that in itself already, with what has been happening in the country, shows that, of course, there is not enough advocacy. There's not enough advocacy because of the stealth ways of doing things of the government. The kids at schools are not taught enough to actually get to know enough about the genocide. The communities themselves that are busy with it advocacy are short of resources, so they are not able to go to all the parts of the country, given that they mostly only do these things with donors. With donor funding and all that, and the lack of political will. So one can never qualify the Namibian government. I mean, the Namibians only got to hear this when advocate, the late PC of the Ovaherero and the late Kauku of the Namas, Kau Piasom Koper, when they sort of rejuvenated this whole thing, Kau Kuiki and others, when they rejuvenated this thing. So it's only then through the papers, through the what, the people come to properly hear about it, particularly this generation. And by the questions that are constantly being asked on Facebook or on social media in general, it shows you that Namibians really don't know much about the subject at all. And of course, so much needs to be done. Please give me, what was your second question? You said it's too far.
No. I think you've perfectly responded to both of them, because I was saying, I was raising the issue of whether there was enough advocacy that was being done, and what you would like to see happen.
For instance, what I would like to see, Okhone, is an uprising and solidarity from the Namibians. One would really want to say that. I think every Namibian, particularly the millennials now, we know what is happening in the state, and we know how affairs are being conducted by our government, and we find ourselves in a certain economic position and other position because of the current governing style of the current regime. So at this point in time, for one to see solidarity from every Namibian, despite your ethnic orientation, every single Namibian to stand up for the affected communities and actually demand participatory rights for these communities. That will be the ultimate thing. Demanding the rights for things like ancestral lands to be included in the constitution, and not the draft of the resettlement criteria that we are seeing around, that is being paraded around, that really vexes a lot of Namibian, particularly from these groups that were affected by the genocide and land dispossession, amongst others. So one would really want to see solidarity from every Namibian, all the way from the Zambezi, from the 2 Kavango regions, the old regions, the Kunene, everywhere, for everybody to just come together, stand with the 2 affected, with the 4 mainly affected communities. Of course, we know the 2 were genocided, the 3 were genocided, and the 1 was affected. To basically just stand in solidarity with them and demand reparations from the. I mean, it could have even been better if it was the Namibian state itself that took Germany to The Hague and demanded reparations from the state of Germany. That could have been even more powerful. We could have, as the affected communities, we could have felt safe, knowing that the Namibian government is indeed in our corner instead of what is going on here.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Thank you for joining us on the Evening Review. See you again.